At this year's United Nations General Assembly, two very different views of the world were on display. From Washington, President Donald Trump dismissed climate change as a hoax, mocked renewable energy, and warned European leaders that their economies would collapse if they kept investing in it. His speech carried the same America First tone that has marked much of his presidency. Not long after, China sent the opposite message. President Xi Jinping announced new climate goals. Greenhouse gas emissions would drop 7 to 10% from their highest levels. By 2035, wind and solar power would expand several times over, and at least 30% of China's energy would come from non-fossil sources. She framed these commitments as part of China's duty to protect the planet and positioned his country as a leader in the shift toward clean energy. The contrast could not have been more striking. The world's biggest economy brushing off climate action, while its main rivals sought to take charge of it. For a country like Canada, tied geographically to the United States but increasingly connected to global markets, this split creates more than a diplomatic problem. It's a strategic challenge. It also helps explain why Canada is strengthening ties with countries like China and Indonesia, both major players in the BRICS group, as it looks for alternatives to its sometimes rocky relationship with the U.S. Some experts even suggest that Canada's growing partnerships with BRICS nations could resemble a kind of informal membership, whether or not it ever officially joins. Recently, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto signed a wide-ranging economic deal that cuts tariffs, opens new investment opportunities, and sets shared rules for digital trade and intellectual property. For Indonesia, the agreement is a big win, giving more than 90% of its exports, from palm oil and textiles to paper and processed foods, easier access to the Canadian market. For Canada, the benefits of the deal with Indonesia are significant. It strengthens the country's place in Southeast Asian supply chains, makes investment rules clearer, and opens new opportunities for Canadian agriculture, processed food, and energy exports. Trade Minister Meninder Sidhu highlighted the potential, noting that products like potash, wheat, and soybeans are already heading to Indonesia, but there's room to expand, especially in agri-food and energy. He also mentioned the prospects for nuclear energy investment, pointing to Canada's expertise in small modular reactors. This deal isn't a one-off. It grew out of negotiations that began in 2021 and fits within Canada's wider push for a free trade agreement with the ASEAN bloc. Foreign Minister Anita Anand confirmed during the ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur that Ottawa is determined to finalize those talks as quickly as possible. We're diversifying and building those trade partnerships, she said in an interview with Bloomberg. Indonesia, for its part, has been equally proactive. Just days before signing with Canada, it wrapped up a trade deal nearly 10 years in the making with the European Union. By securing both agreements, Jakarta is cementing its role as a regional hub that can balance partnerships between Western economies and BRICS countries. Beyond Indonesia, Canada is also rethinking its relationship with China. During the UN meetings in New York, Prime Minister Mark Carney met with Chinese Premier Li Qiang, describing the talks as positive. He noted that while there are already many areas of commercial exchange between the two countries, the potential for future cooperation is even greater. Carney singled out energy and agriculture as areas where Canada and China could work more closely. China already imports liquefied natural gas from the new LNG Canada terminal, and Carney said his government wants that facility expanded quickly. He also pointed to agriculture as another growth opportunity. This outreach reflects a change in tone. Carney has tried to ease the tensions that escalated under former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, when Ottawa joined Washington in imposing heavy tariffs, 100%, on Chinese electric vehicles and 25% on steel and aluminum. China hit back by restricting Canadian canola, pork, and seafood imports, deepening the rift. Carney made clear that Canada has not copied every U.S. tariff and avoided singling out electric vehicles. Instead, he defended Canada's steel tariffs, arguing that the sector needs protection from dumping. I had an open discussion with Premier Li about Canada's steel tariffs, he said, and I remain firm about defending our industry. At the same time, he emphasized the importance of dialogue. adding that he expects to eventually meet with President Xi Jinping while continuing talks with Premier Li. Foreign Minister Anita Anand struck a similar note, saying Canada must cooperate with China where possible, but also push back when necessary, the essence of its Indo-Pacific strategy. China is, after all, Canada's second-largest trading partner after the U.S., and canola exports alone bring in tens of billions of dollars each year. Anand also revealed she had spoken with other major buyers to ensure Canadian canola exporters have alternative trade routes. The need for Canada to diversify is urgent. Roughly three-quarters of its exports still go to the U.S., but the Trump administration has imposed steep new tariffs, 35%, on Canadian goods overall and 50% on steel and aluminum, tightening the squeeze on Ottawa. For Canadian manufacturers, miners, and farmers, the new U.S. tariffs are a major blow. This is happening even though Canada, the U.S., and Mexico are still tied together under the USMCA trade deal signed during Trump's first term. Ottawa's shift in strategy is not just about diplomacy. It's about building real infrastructure to secure its economic future. The government purchased and expanded the Trans Mountain Pipeline, the country's only West Coast route, capable of loading oil tankers for Pacific exports. Meanwhile, a new liquefied natural gas facility in British Columbia, supported by Shell, Petronas, and PetroChina, has begun operations to meet Asia's growing energy demand. Together, these projects are central to Canada's plan to expand its export capacity and reduce reliance on the U.S., ensuring its energy and agricultural products can reach Asian markets even when North American politics become unpredictable. Canada's relationship with India has also been tense in recent years, strained by allegations of interference and the fallout from the Nijar case. But 2025 brought a turning point. As host of the G7, Prime Minister Mark Carney invited Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi for his first official visit to Canada in a decade. Modi accepted, saying both nations would move forward with renewed vigor, guided by mutual respect and common interests. The symbolism was significant. Both governments agreed to restore diplomatic ties, reappoint ambassadors, and restart talks on agriculture, energy, and critical minerals. On the sidelines of the summit, Carney and Modi pledged closer cooperation on food security, artificial intelligence, and climate resilience. For Canada, this was a careful but deliberate step toward repairing a relationship too important to leave on hold. The broader meaning lies in India's position within BRICS. Alongside China and Indonesia, it forms one of the bloc's central pillars, carrying enormous economic and political weight and offering Canada a pathway into a more balanced global strategy. By rebuilding ties with New Delhi, striking a trade deal with Jakarta, and cautiously reopening dialogue with Beijing, Canada is drawing itself into the economic orbit of BRICS. This doesn't mean Ottawa is preparing to leave the G7 or NATO, but it does suggest Canada is edging closer to BRICS economies, even if informally. Inviting Prime Minister Modi to the G7 was more than a diplomatic gesture. It was a signal that Canada's strategy now involves balancing its Western commitments with deeper engagement in the networks of an emerging bloc that is reshaping global trade. Talk of Canada drifting toward BRICS has grown louder, though the reality is more nuanced. Ottawa remains firmly opposed to Russia's war in Ukraine and has shown no wavering on sanctions or its strong backing of Kyiv. That makes formal BRICS membership very unlikely. Still, what stands out is Canada's growing interaction with individual BRICS members. In just a few months, Ottawa has signed a major trade pact with Indonesia, reopened dialogue with China, and welcomed India's Prime Minister to the G7 summit in Alberta. Together, these steps show a pragmatic effort to connect with BRICS-linked economies while remaining firmly rooted in Western alliances. The message is hard to miss. The global order is shifting, and middle powers like Canada are adjusting their positions to prepare for uncertainty. Whether this pivot is mostly a reaction to President Trump's protectionist trade policies, or part of a broader recognition that global influence is spreading beyond the transatlantic world, remains to be seen. What is clear is that Canada has entered a more flexible phase in its foreign policy. one where its tilt toward rising. BRICS economies will be closely watched. The story might stop here, but my request to you continues. This channel doesn't have sponsors or corporate backing. It exists only because of people like you. If you believe that truth should never be for sale, then I'm asking for your support. Subscribe, hit the like button, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every action, a click, a comment, a subscription, tells the algorithm that independent voices deserve to be heard. It may feel like a small thing, but together, it's the only way a channel like this can grow, and the only way truth can endure.